Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you guys for coming. Thanks for Fast Markets for asking me to speak. I'm not sure if it's good to be the first one or later on because I don't know if everybody's awake. But anyway, so be it. So SA Recycling, what is SA Recycling? SA Recycling, joint venture between Sims Metal Management and Adam Steel, my family business. I, of course, thought A should be first. It should be Adam Sims, but SA Recycling didn't work very well. So we had to go SA, right? You know, so 140 locations, 3,500 employees, about 5 million tons a year, 1.2 billion pounds of non-ferrous. And I think in the last 10 years, we've spent about $1.2 billion in acquisitions. Which is just a crazy number to me. But my family always jokes that I never met a scrapyard that I don't like, which is probably true. So people always ask, like, did I have this grand plan, you know, to build this build this business? And there certainly was no grand plan. I'm telling you, in 1977, when I started working full-time with my father, you know, his goal was to make $20,000 a month, and my goal was to make payroll, and there was no grand plan. We put our first shredder in 1980, and which we bought from Scott Newell, which I think he's here somewhere. There he is. We bought from Scott an old piece of junk that he had put a new one in, and this one was laying in the field, and I think it was from Simon & Sons, right? And anyway, I put the shredder in. Today we have 24 shredders, but back then, put that shredder in and started shredding. And it worked fine the first day, and the second day it didn't work so good, and the third day I'm calling Scott, and he happened to be flying, I think, to Hawaii. And I called him up, and he happened to be in town, and he said, okay, I'll come over. So he drove over, and he looked at the shredder, and he says, let's open up the box. And he opened up the box, and of course, we hadn't changed hammers in 3 days. And he says, George, you got to change the hammers every day. And I'm like, what do you mean? Why do you have to do that? That's how dumb I was with, you know, shredders. Back then, I didn't know anything about shredders. Anyway, we had the shredder. We couldn't really compete to buy scrap. And so, you know, over the years, we started buying little yards to feed our shredder. And and then once you kind of build that model, it just kind of grew from there, right? I got more yards to feed my shredder. I got a bigger shredder, which needed more yards, and then bought another shredder, and it just kind of grew from there. You had a model and just kept working it. So, consolidation, what's driving it? I mean, obviously, I think there's a lot of things that drive it, but if you want to take, you know, 4 main drivers, right? Decarbonization, I think, is a big driver. Reshoring, shortages of scrap, like I just talked about for us, and regulations, right? And so when you look at decarbonization, you know, the World Steel Association says next year this year we're going to do about 1.85 billion tons. And that of that, we're using about 30% scrap, which is 5.5 million tons, 550 million tons of scrap. They say that by 2050, so in 30 years, that's going to be 2.6 billion tons of new steel. I have no idea how they figure these numbers out, so I'm not smart enough. I'm using their numbers. It's going to be 2.6 billion tons, and it's going to be 50% scrap, which would be, you know, 1.2 billion tons or 1.3 billion tons. Okay, I don't see any way that's possible. There's not going to be that much scrap. You're not going to double the scrap in the next 30 years, in my opinion. But what that does tell me is that scrap is going to be short. So now what's happening is that countries want to decarbonize, and so they want to keep their scrap, right? Because the blast furnaces put out a lot more greenhouse gases than steel mills. So countries want to decarbonize, which means that they're going to try to keep their scrap. And so you see all these protectionist laws that are taking place because they want to keep their scrap in-house in their country, and so that they can meet their decarbonization goals. So right now, I think there's 43 countries now that have protection laws in place, and I think after some of the EU laws pass that are currently in the works or in the process of being passed, it's going to be 71 countries. So now, if you look at the U.S., right, the U.S. itself is importing scrap. Obviously we export scrap off of the coast, but because of the Jones Act, it's pretty hard to make that scrap come back around to where you need it, maybe in the Gulf. And so we end up exporting off the coast, and we import into different places where we're short. Last year, I think we imported 4.5 million tons. And so you can imagine that if, with the protectionist laws in place, if that 4.5 million tons didn't come in the country here, obviously we would be even shorter of scrap. So right now, there's no secret, there's a tremendous amount of reshoring going on, which is another big driver, I feel, of this consolidation. And so you can say what all the different things you want for reshoring, whether it's COVID, it's Ukraine, it's tensions between China and Taiwan, or it's supply chain, right? People concerned about what's going on. So, but whatever the reasons, it's happening, and there is so much new capacity either coming online, being built. I think it's about 10 million tons. Some people debate that with me, but between what's been coming online right now and what's in the process of being planned, and so, which is further going to make scrap short. And so I think it's just happening. People think we're going to have a recession. I don't know how you have a recession when you have full unemployment and you have all this reshoring going on. So I don't think you're going to have a recession. But also our own trade laws, right? 232 and the different trade laws we have in place make the United States the most profitable, I think, steel-making country in the world. And so people, it gives our steel mills an advantage, and it makes them want to build more steel here and make more steel here, which is probably why Nippon Steel is trying to come here, right? Buying U.S. steel. So with all these millions of tons of new capacity coming along, in my opinion, there won't be enough scrap to go around. So, and because of that shortage, steel mills are concerned about feeding their electric arc furnaces, and so they want to control their supply, and which is why I feel one of the big drivers that you see steel mills buying scrap yards. That's not a secret. They want a scrap flow that they can trust. Also, yards like myself that have multiple shredders, we want a scrap flow that we can trust for our shredders, which drives, my, reasons for grabbing yards. I was talking to one of my friends, and he said, yeah, they want to speak to me. They want me to talk on consolidation. And he says, George, you're the problem with consolidation. So, obviously, steel mills want to have consistent feed for their steel mills. Yards like myself with multiple shredders want to have consistent feed for their shredders. And that's what, drives us to try to, buy more yards as far as what we're doing. And I think that shortage of scrap and the difficulty getting scrap is again, the biggest driver for consolidation. So also, cost of regulations. There's so much new laws, that are taking place. And with, having yards be concrete, all the air emissions that they're talking about, putting through the, putting stuff under buildings. You go into old time scrap yards and, they're dirt. If you go into a scrap yard in California and it's dirt, the DTSC will walk into your yard in California, and they'll take a gun I don't mean a gun with bullets, but I mean a metal gun, like you would check metal, and they have a mining program on, and they'll shoot the dirt, and if you fail, if they'll shoot the dirt, and if you're high in lead, then they'll literally, write you a ticket on the spot. And so that doesn't happen in other places of the country, but certainly happens in California. The IE in California, you can't have a dirt yard. You got to have a concrete yard. I'm not saying all of that type of, extent of regulations will expand around the country, but as more and more states develop and there's more regulations, what happens is the small guys don't want to, or either one, they don't want to change, or two, they don't have the money to change. And so they decide to sell, and they don't want to adapt. And so those changing laws will also drive consolidation for people to sell out because they don't want to comply. So people, there's, I've been using scrap. John doesn't want me to use scrap, okay? He wants me to use recycled metal. I've been using scrap the whole time because my whole life I've used scrap. But Johnny says we're not supposed to use scrap. We're supposed to use recycled metal. So, okay. So so if you're a recycled metal dealer, okay, it just doesn't roll off my tongue, okay? I struggle with that, all right? If you're a recycled metal dealer, how do you compete against a steel mill? And, there's a lot of people in our industry, by our industry, meaning my side of the industry, that talk about how do you compete against steel mills and how do you, worried about it and different stuff. Look, I feel like, a small, determined entrepreneur is always going to be able to have a spot. They just have a way of going in and talking to the customers and giving them that personal service that whether you're a steel mill or whether you're a big company like myself, that just can't do it, right? When you got the owner right there that's talking directly to the person that's there, I think that I just think it goes. But there's always a place, and I think no matter what happens with consolidation, you'll always have small dealers that are in business. It's just a fact, and I think that for me, right, we go into a market and we try to buy up as much of our supply as we have, and then the minute you think you really have a good control of the supply, someone else opens up again, right? And there's always a place. And there's always room for more people to compete against you. But I feel like right now the steel mills have so much buying power because I think the prices of new steel are the highest that they've ever been margin-wise compared to scrap. And so I think right now it gives them tremendous power, and you can't beat them. And so, but I think in the future, I think that's going to change. I feel that, as more production comes online, as more steel mills are built, then there's going to be a lot more new steel available, and so you won't see the shortages, which means I think that's going to bring the price down. And then, that building all those new steel mills, I think is going to, as I said earlier, going to make scrap short, which is going to bring the price up. And so I think that the margins that are out there today will not be there in the future. And so that doesn't mean that I think that the recycled metal dealers are going to be having a great time, because I think that's going to squeeze their prices too, because it's going to, that shortage of scrap is going to make everybody chase scrap. And so you're going to have tough margins all the way around, but it won't be all on the side of the steel mill. And so I think overall, scrap is going to be tight. margins are going to be tight, and everybody's going to be fighting for scrap. So, which I go back to where I started with, which is why I've never met a scrapyard that I don't like. So that's my thoughts on consolidation, and we have just about 5 minutes for me to take questions. Oh, there we go. What will fill the scrap gap? The recycled metals gap, right? There you go. Look at, I think certainly they're going to build more DRI plants, but you can't build enough DRI for everything. So I think the blast furnaces are still going to run. I don't think they're going to decarbonize, as quick as they think they're going to decarbonize. And so I think there's still going to be a place for blast furnaces, and there's just not enough scrap to do that. In Europe, there's a trend that mills buy the largest recyclers. Do you see this as an option in the U.S.? I think that it's, steel mills are very large companies, and I think it's much easier for them to buy large recyclers, right? Running a lot of yards is very difficult. And so if you can, if you're going to buy 10 yards that each do 1,000 tons, or you buy 1 yard that does 10,000 tons, it's obviously a lot easier to buy 1 yard. So I certainly think that all the steel mills will buy the largest recyclers. What is my opinion on steel mills buying scrap companies? I think that I totally respect why they're doing it, and I just think we need to get over it. They've invested hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to build steel mills, and they want to control their scrap. And so they're going to come in our market. They're going to vertically integrate, and if we think anything different, we're dreaming. But that doesn't mean there's not a place. And, steel mills they're there to make steel, right? And so they're not necessarily either, not that they can't hire people, that out there buying recyclables, but like I said, there's always a place for someone who knows their market, who's grown up in that market, who lives that market, who knows the customers, to be able to buy metal. What it's in store for the small independent dealer within the mass consolidation. Look, as I said earlier, I think there's a lot of room for small independent dealers. I tell people all the time, obviously we buy a lot of yards, and I tell people all the time that I'm never going to do as good a job as they do. And, they think that we're going to go and buy them and we're going to make more money. It's not true. When we buy a yard, we make less money, because they always are going to do a better job, because they're living it, breathing it every single day. You've got the owner that's out there in front. You got maybe his wife's on the scale. He's got, family members that are on the forklift, and he's out talking to the customers, or she's out talking to the customers. And they always do a better job than we do. But we can do it on volume. Certainly there's some things that we can bring to the table, because we have environmental people, we have legal, we have a lot of different resources that we can spread around. But they're always going to do a better job, in my opinion. What do I look for in yards you're interested in acquiring? For me, it's really about location, right? I don't, we're in different markets. I'm not going to go buy a yard in Maine. I have nothing up there, right? We try to buy stuff that it's a hub and a spoke model for us. So we try to buy yards that feed our that feed our hub. And so I don't try to shotgun and go someplace else. People call me all the time, like, do you want to buy a yard in Hawaii? And my people say, yeah, let's go to Hawaii, because they want to go to Hawaii. But we have nothing in Hawaii, right? It doesn't make sense for us to try to buy a yard in Hawaii. And so we try to focus on stuff that feeds us. And we normally stay south because it's warmer. And of course, when we bought PSC, we went to Ohio, which is cold as F up there. And I was up there last week and froze my you-know-what off. But anyway, it's all good. I'm not used to the snow like there. You walk out in the yard and it's like you look out and you have all these big piles of scrap and they're all white. And you're like, okay, what the hell is that? You can't tell if it's bushling or HMS or PNS. It's all under snow. It's the craziest shit I've ever seen. And anyway, yeah, I'm just not used to the snow. I know you guys in the north are used to that, but that's different for me. All right, so look at my time supposedly ran out. But have any more questions? You guys can always call me or text me or whatever if you want to. So anyway, thanks again. I appreciate everybody listening.